Happy Valentine's Day, lovebirds, and welcome to the Just Baseball Show. Today, we have the 2025 college baseball preview to get you up to speed for Division One opening day. Today, I am joined by Jared Perkins and Tyler Jennings. I'm Peter Apple, by the way, and these guys are the hosts of On the Clock, the newest podcast added to the Just Baseball Media Network. I brought them here to break down their top 10 teams, go over the preseason first team All Americans, and we'll end with our favorite picks to win the College World Series and the Golden Spikes Award. And it is all brought to you by the sportsbook Born in Vegas, BetMGM. Remember, use code JUSTBASEBALL to get that first bet offer up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first wager loses. It only lasts through the end of the weekend. So if you want to sprinkle on anything we're talking about college baseball wise, make sure to jump on that before it closes up. But before we break into the preview, gentlemen, let the people know what should they expect from this new podcast, On the Clock. What's up, guys?
Yeah, how's it going? Excited. College baseball season's here. I can give you a little bit of overview of kind of what we're doing on the college side, then turn it to Tyler, talk a little bit about the draft stuff. But our goal is to just create an all-encompassing like college baseball MLB draft hub, right? We want to have all the news and analysis coming your way from college baseball, MLB draft video, interviews with coaches and players across the league. We're basically doing one episode a week during the season. It'll be two because we'll have a special interview that goes out with like a draft prospect or a coach from across the league on like Thursday. So we're trying to do two episodes a week. But Tyler, what do you got for the draft stuff?
It kind of just a lot of like film breakdown or even just like writing breakdowns in general too. Like we'll be in Arlington this weekend, so we'll be getting a lot of live looks at some of the top teams in the country, and not only that, just like the top players in the country, like Cam Cannarella, Brendan Summerhill, Gabe Davis, all these guys. So breaking down that film, kind of just having a feel for what the class is at this point, and kind of just looking at what's ahead. Like that's the biggest thing right now is we're at this point now on the way to July 13th. So I'm excited to get down and dirty with this class, honestly.
Well, I'm excited to have you guys on. I've already been on the YouTube. I've been listening to all the podcasts just to get myself ready. So I highly recommend anybody listening go check out On the Clock. You can find them on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you do listen. So without further ado, gentlemen, let's get straight into it. Again, these guys have released their top draft prospects. They've released top 25 college baseball teams. They've even done high school draft prospects. They're doing it all over there, but we're here to talk about the top 10 and then, of course, Golden Spikes, College World Series, the whole nine. All right. So before we get into the top 10, best teams outside of the top 10, you guys
Mm.
have released your top 25. Jared, are you just going to go with number 11th ranked?
Nah, So we're going just outside the top 10. I don't know if I'm going to go with just number 11 ranked. The one that really sticks out to me, we'll go look at number 18 in the Arizona Wildcats. Tyler mentioned it. Brendan Summerhill is like the key cog to that entire machine right there. Outfielder who's probably number six on our draft list, I think. Tyler, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that lineup is just absolutely stacked. They got a guy named Mason White who's on the infield. Just it's absolute tanks. They're fully loaded. Pitching staff's a little bit of a question about kind of who's going to round out that rotation. They announced it today. Colin McKinney's taking the ball on Friday nights, and he possesses some really intriguing stuff. But I really like the Wildcats.
Tyler, what about you?
I will be the person that goes with number 11 on this one. Just with North Carolina, like what they had last year, they lose Vance Honeycutt. Casey Cook was another key piece in that lineup, but they really reloaded this year too. And Scott Forbes and his staff has done an amazing job year in, year out with the stuff that they have. They get Folger Boaz back, who was out last year a bit with an elbow issue. I think he may have had like an internal brace surgery, but he'll be back this year. Jake Knapp's returned. Jason DeCaro, who's one of the youngest sophomores in the country, is going to return and lead that staff. So they got a lot of stuff going, not to mention Luke Stevenson, who I like to call the second coming of Kyle Schwarber,
Hmm.
is returning for a sophomore year, and a lot of freshmen on that team, but they're all pretty advanced freshmen. Sawyer Black. There's a kid from I think Sanford, North Carolina, whose name I'm blanking out right now. I think it's Cameron Seagraves is his name. Are two guys that kind of really stood out in the fall. and there's just a lot of experience on that ball club. So for me, it's UNC at number 11, kind of just that first team that stands out to me that really I thought could be top 10 going into this year.
And definitely top 10 when it comes to uniforms. The spouter blues
Yes.
are
Yeah.
my favorite. Let's get to another blue team, the Duke Blue Devils, coming in at number 10 on the top 25 college baseball team, or top 25 college baseball rankings, excuse me. Tyler, I'll throw it over to you as the North Carolina guy. Why is Duke a top 10 team coming into the year?
Yeah, so like you mentioned it before, this is a team that lost to UConn in that Norman regional last year. And personally, I thought Duke should have had a regional. Personally, they should have hosted. Um, but unfortunately, just with the way that it is with their ballpark, they've had to renovate everything. It's kind of a small park. It would have been tough. But Kyle Johnson, AJ Gracia, those are the two big names to kind of look out for this year. Gracia had outside of Drew Burress, probably the best freshman year of any outfielder in the ACC. And Kyle Johnson is an exciting two-way player who's been up to 96 from the left side on the bump with a good slider and changeup. And he also hits a bunch of tanks. So those are the two guys that really stand out. But they also get Ben Miller back. He was hitting 400 up until it was like mid-April last year in ACC play. And kind of just looking up and down the roster too, Wallace Clark returns. They get a couple of good transfers in with Jake Hyde, Ben Rounds, and they also get Sam Harris, finally some like full-time play. If you're looking for a guy who hits the ball hard as anybody in the country, Sam Harris is the guy for that. And it's really, really effortless. So I'm looking to see what he can do to kind of like boost this Duke ball club to the next level. But also looking at the rotation to get Andrew Healy back to pair with Kyle Johnson. And you might be even looking at like James Talon kind of filling out that last rotation spot too. He's been a reliever for 2 years. Very intriguing lefty with an explosive fastball. So for me, kind of looking at what they have, you can even throw in guys like Gabe Nard, who can be a really good bullpen piece. David Boiswa, who's also going to be in the back end of that bullpen. So they might be the most well-rounded team in the ACC that's not Virginia for me. And really, Chris Pollard knows what he's doing with his ball club. He's taken them deep plenty of times recently. I think this may actually end up being the year that we see Duke in Omaha, and I would sign up for that wholeheartedly.
Jared, Tyler pretty much covered it, but I want
Yeah.
to hear a little bit more about Kyle Johnson because he's on
It,
your preseason first team All Americans as the best two-way player in the country. What makes him so good on both sides of the ball?
I mean, he just got the ability and the athleticism to be both a solid player on the mound and at the plate as well. I don't know what Tyler, you might know what position he's going to play more on the offensive side of the ball, but his guy went 4-1 last year, posted a 4.38 ERA, and struck out 53 batters in 49 innings pitched. Like he's just a guy who's going to be solid. He's going into he did that as a freshman, so he's going into the sophomore year, and it's going to really try to build on that.
Tyler, anything left on Kyle
I
Johnson?
I believe he'll be playing a corner outfield spot this year.
Yeah.
Shades of Braden Montgomery?
Mm.
Maybe. I wouldn't be shocked. Maybe if kind of like a weird comp to make, but maybe if Braden Montgomery had a usable right-handed swing, personally, that's I don't mean to, talk bad of a player, but like there was definitely a lot of talk last year leading up to the draft of is Braden Montgomery a switch hitter legitimately at the next level? And the right-handed swing was just not good enough for me. The contact was down. It was like an OPS difference of like 400 points between his lefty splits and his righty splits. So um, for me, I think making the power comparison, like right-handed bat, I could see it.
All right, let's get to number 9, the Georgia Bulldogs. They finished 43 and 17 last year. They advanced out of the Athens Regional, but then were eliminated by NC State in the next round. No Charlie Condon, no problem, right, Jared?
I really love this team. I low key think they're kind of underrated in some sense, even though they're in the top 10. You got Wes Johnson at the helm there. He's in his second season with Georgia now, I believe. Learned from Jay Johnson at LSU. He was the pitching coach with the Minnesota Twins for a little bit. Just as a player's coach, guys love to go play for him, and you could absolutely see it in the transfer portal. They brought in a bunch of dudes. They have 5 guys in their lineup from the transfer portal, 1 guy in the rotation. And I think the thing I love about this team the most is that they're old, right? They got a ton of experience. 4 juniors in the rotation. They have six seniors, I believe, in their lineup right now. Ryan Zaborowski came over from Miami, Ohio. That guy just absolutely mashes baseballs and goes into his senior year at Georgia, just looking to really take them to the next level. They brought in Devin Obie. We talked about Duke. He's a transfer from Duke. Wound up getting eligibility. This guy who slashed 309, 399, 599 last year. And then they're highlighted by Trey Phelps, who's probably the best draft prospect on that team in the lineup right now. Just a really athletic kid, mashes baseballs. I mean, he's a ton of fun. And then in the bullpen, they got Brian Curley from Virginia Commonwealth University, who's on our preseason first team All American team. Posted a 2.87 ERA last year and struck out 78 guys in 70 innings pitched. Like he's good. They're top to bottom. I think just really a solid team.
Tyler, I want to know a little bit more about Trey Phelps because we're talking about draft prospects, freshman last year, right? Georgia already came in with Charlie Condon. Is this kind of the next guy you think that can go really high in the draft?
I wouldn't be shocked at all in the slightest. Kind of just looking at what he did compared to like even after a senior year of high school, there's a lot of inconsistencies with the defense, and there's a lot of swing and miss. But then goes to Georgia, hammers the ball insanely hard. I'm even working on video on him right now from May when he played against South Carolina. He hit 4 home runs that weekend in 3 games, and mind you, that's also the same weekend that Charlie Condon broke the BB Core home run record. So he won up Condon on just his historic weekend. So for me, I think he's an outfielder at the next level. I wouldn't be shocked if he's third base. It's kind of the start of the year, but maybe transition between the two spots. But it's a legitimate bat with fuel to hit and also insane power. I already had exit velocities up to 110 last year. To even take it a step further, like the draft eligible sophomores this year, and Phelps is one of them. They feel like a better class than the draft eligible juniors in this class, which is pretty insane to say because you look at what we have, like Jace Laviolette, top of the list, Jimmy Arnold, Tyler Bremner, those guys are, cream of the crop in this class, but there's some sneaky good sophomores in this class, and Phelps is definitely fits the bill on that one.
Number 8 on the top 10 teams, Oregon State. They finished 45-16 last year. They advanced out of the Corvallis Regional last year, but ultimately lost to Kentucky in the next round. Tyler or Jared, who's the West Coast guy? Like who's breaking down Oregon State?
I could go either way. Tyler, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, I can take this one. The biggest thing to look at with Oregon State is kind of just looking at how tough that schedule is now with them being an independent. Like they have three big tournaments scheduled within the first like 3 or 4 weeks of the season, and normally you see a team of one. If that tells you the impact that the Pac-12 kind of dissolving on them and them kind of being left alone. Um, but they return a lot of firepower, like Gavin Turley, Dallas Macias, Trent Caraway comes back after being injured last year, had a good Cape season. Ava Arquette comes in from Washington, so they got a lot of firepower. And Arquette, if I remember correctly, was top 5 on our college list, about a month ago. So they've got a lot of lineup depth and a lot of power in that lineup. So I'm excited to see what they do, even with losing Travis Bazzana last year to the draft. Cleveland won one pick. But looking at what they have on the mound, I don't want to say it's underwhelming, but they've got some sneaky good depth, honestly. The more I look at this lineup, like I think they've said Nelson Keljo is going to be their Friday guy. Not Leif Palmer, but Dax Whitney's their Saturday guy, who is a true freshman from Idaho that had a lot of helium late in the cycle last year for the draft. He decided to go to college and turned down a lot of money for that too. Um, and you're even looking at guys like Eric Segura and Leif Palmer who have some insanely good stuff that aren't going to be in the rotation to start the year, but they're legitimate arms to come out of the bullpen for this team to pair with guys like Kellen Oates, or I think Drew Talvez is another guy with a sneaky good fastball. So they're pretty sneaky this year, I would say, on the pitching side. But overall, like you cannot find a better lineup on the West Coast, in my opinion, with the Oregon State team. They've done an insanely good job of fighting the kind of futility with losing their main conference, but now they have the the depth and they have the scheduling to kind of go with that. And it's going to be tough. I believe they go to Nebraska at one point, and I want to say there's another Big Ten team that they face that's really far out there. So they've got a lot of travel on their hands, but we'll see what happens. I have full faith in Mitch Canham and guiding this team to another super regional appearance.
So Jared and Tyler as well. We'll talk about Ava Arquette later when we talk about the preseason first team All Americans. But I want to ask you, Jared, do you think it's a pro or a negative that they're independent? Because Tyler was talking about the amount of travel, the tough
Yeah.
schedule. Don't you think that puts them at a disadvantage, or am I missing something?
I think it puts them at somewhat of a disadvantage, right? Because you're gonna have your ACC, Big Ten, Big 12 teams that like on the West Coast join those conferences. They're gonna have some weird travel schedules, but for Oregon State, like having to build that schedule without a conference is real tough, right? You don't get your set schedule against like the prime premier opponents like in the ACC. You got to go find everybody for every single weekend. And I think it's gonna be tough for them to navigate, but it's like Tyler said, like that head coach Mitch Canham, like he's one of the best in the business, and I think he's gonna be able to navigate that well with his guys. And frankly, I mean, like the lineup's really stacked. The rotation's got some question marks, but like it's one of those things like that. If anything is gonna hurt them, it might be that schedule.
Tyler, do you think that you could spin it into a positive where Oregon State has this really tough schedule? They have to travel all the time. They're facing teams from all of these different conferences, and it actually sets them up for a run if they get to the College World Series and even getting to Omaha. Is that something, or am I just making shit up?
No, I don't think you're making shit up at all. That's a net positive with this kind of scheduling is like they're facing some of the best teams in the country. Like you look at what they start off with the year. I believe they're down in surprise for the College Baseball Classic. So they get Indiana, who's kind of like a sneaky good Big Ten team. Then you get Virginia, Oklahoma, and Minnesota at the Round Rock Classic week 2. And then you go to Arlington for Baylor, Auburn, and Ohio State, who Auburn's kind of turned it around. Like, yes, they weren't great last year. I believe they may have missed Hoover for the SEC tournament, but they did good jobs in the portal. They have some sneaky good guys. I think they're going to do pretty well. Ohio State's another guy. They take Justin Hare from Campbell, and Justin Hare's kind of really turned that club around. Like they got some good transfers in there. Matt Graveline's a really good catcher that could hit for power. So I think they're kind of sneaky to start. But then after that, like you go to Rutgers, I believe, or sorry, they Rutgers goes to them. Um, but they also go to Nebraska after that. UC Irvine comes up there for a weekend series after that. Cal State Fullerton the week after. This is a really tough schedule. They even go to Oregon at one point in the season, and Oregon might just be the best team in the Big 12. So, kind of looking at that, you get through that gauntlet of an early season schedule, but also, you ace the test at Oregon, you ace the test in Nebraska. You're now in good hands with the committee to have, at minimum, a regional host. But at the end of the day, you do well in those games, you might be a national seed at the end of the day. So that's the positive to kind of spin here is like Oregon State does well here. They're suited up very, very nicely for a deep run in the tournament if they are a national seed.
Definitely a team to watch when we get there, right? That they could make a
Yeah.
sneaky run because they've done all that they can to get to this point, and they might be the most seasoned bunch when it comes to making the trip down to Omaha. Number 7, Clemson Tigers. They finished 44-16 last year. They got their own regional advance out of the Clemson regional, but unfortunately lost to Florida in the next round. We've talked about that outfielder, Cam Canarella.
Yeah.
Is he just the guy that's going to lead them here, Jared, or are they stacked throughout?
I mean, I think they're stacked for the route, but I think winning for them runs through Cam Cannarella, right? Like he's one of the most athletic players in college baseball. Even with a torn labrum last year, he still slashed 337, 417, 561. And so he was playing through like a shoulder injury all last year, made that incredible catch during that injury as well during the playoffs. So like if he's completely healthy, I think Tyler mentioned this on our college baseball preview. Like he could be the number one overall player in the draft, and so like I think everything runs through Cam. He's electric. He plays with a ton of energy. Like the team feeds and fuels off of him. So I think he's your guy. But they also got guys like Aiden Knack, who's one of the best pitchers in college baseball last year. Struck out 108 guys in 83 innings pitched, posted a 3.35 ERA. So you got your Friday guy who can go out and get you W's. I mean, I really like this team a lot. And then you have your head coach Eric Bakich, right? Like that guy is suspended for the first 2 games of the year. He said he's gonna be calling games on the radio because he can't get suspended from the radio. So like he's brought in the Savannah Bananas, had Clemson playing the Savannah Bananas this year. Like he's just a fun coach. Like he's got all those guys on the same page, and I think this team's gonna be a lot of fun.
Tyler, do you think that this Clemson team has some boom or bust to them, right? With such top end talent and then maybe it drops off a certain way? Or do you think that those guys who maybe, Jared didn't mention are going to be able to hold their weight enough?
Um, I will say this with a lot of ACC teams, there is boomer bust to them. Like Stanford, who's in their top 25. Stanford has the potential to be an Omaha caliber team, or they have the potential to kind of return to what they were last year, where they finished like 10 games under 500. But Clemson is one of those teams where they have that they have the pitching staff to kind of make it happen. Like we mentioned Canarella as a guy that, is the leader of the team, but like Luke Gaffney's on that team. They got Colin Priest from Michigan last year. Jaron Purify is as a sophomore that a lot of guys have eyes on this year. So it's not just like a one trick pony in the lineup with Canarella. They have a lot of guys to really bounce off of. Tristan Becerra comes back after having a good campaign last year. So they're pretty deep offensively. And then you look at what they have on the pitching side, like we mentioned Knack, who as a freshman was doing everything that Jared had listed, striking out 108 guys in 83 innings with arguably the best changeup in the country. But also they bring in Michael Gillen from Seton Hall to kind of be that secondary starter on the weekends to help them out. Ethan Darton returns, who had experience last year down the stretch and pitched pretty well for them. So I'm excited to see what these guys can do. I want to say their bullpen too. Like you look at guys like Drew Titsworth. I think he's number 00. It's one of the funniest name and number combos in the country, but he's legit. Like he's a very good pitcher. He showed it last year. So I'm excited to see what this Clemson team does, and I do believe they're suited best in the ACC outside of like maybe even Virginia in terms of offensive firepower.
And next up at number 6, we got Florida State. Finished 49-17 last year, went all the way to Omaha, but eventually lost to the reigning champs, Tennessee, led by the best pitcher in the country, Jamie Arnold. Jared, if they didn't face Tennessee, I mean, they probably, right? If you face Tennessee early
Yeah.
and you lose, or if you face Tennessee late, you probably lose either way. But do you think there's an extra chip on their shoulder, knowing, all right, all we did was lose to the national champs. We got the best pitcher in college baseball on the mound. We think we can beat anybody.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing I talked about in our college baseball preview too. Is like which we kind of went through like what teams are going to really have a big chip on their shoulder. Of course, you're going to have like Texas A&M at the top, but I think Florida State's another one that could be doing the same. But they also had a lot of roster turnover, right? Cam Smith, James Tibbs, both gone. They Jamie Arnold, like you said, ace of the staff, but there's a real big drop off in that rotation and that entire pitching staff after that. They brought in a lot of transfers to kind of like carry, try to carry the water for them, but it's going to be kind of rough trying to see what they put together there. But there's still tons of talent there. Jackson West looked absolutely incredible this fall, who's the catcher for Florida State. They brought Miles Bailey in, who's a freshman, who's one of the guys that was being considered for the MLB draft last year. Hits absolute moon balls. Like that dude hits balls farther than you could ever think of. They got like Chase Williams in the outfield, Max Williams. Like this is a good team. I'm just curious on how they kind of put everything together.
Yeah, Tyler, how are we replacing Cam Smith and Tibbs in here? James Tibbs, how are we doing this?
Oh man, it's almost impossible to like replace those guys, right? Like Cam Smith, I would argue Cam Smith was probably better than Tibbs personally. But Tibbs was just so hot to start the year and to go through and everything. It was really impressive from both guys. But to replace that power, to get Hunter Carnes from high school, who is arguably one of the most powerful right-handed bats in last year's class. Jackson West is taking that step forward, and Max Williams, as much as there's issues with contact and as much as there's issues with his chase rate, he has sneaky good power from the left side. I think he got max of exit velocity last year, like 114, 115. So he's a really powerful left-handed bat in that lineup. So I think he's in for a big year. But also, Mr. Moonball launcher himself, Miles Bailey, comes in, is also doing the same thing. He might have 70 grade power at the next level, but um, it's really really difficult to replace those two guys. And also, Cam Leiter may not even throw a pitch for them this year, so that pitching staff is going to have a lot of work cut out for them, unfortunately. And I'm hoping I'm wrong on the Leiter thing. It just doesn't seem like at this point in time, there's any indications that we see him on the bump this year. So it might be a really tough evaluation for him at year's end. Related to the Leiter family, obviously. He's cousins of Jack and Al, but he only pitched 7 games last year, and the year before that, it's kind of a really rough freshman year at UCF where he found glimpses of what he could be at the end of the year. But the lack of availability has kind of cut him down compared to, he's got first round stuff, but availability is your best ability. So hopefully, I'm wrong and Leiter does pitch this year. I would love that if that happened to kind of pair him with Jamie Arnold again, but it's going to be a tough task when Joey Vellini and Wes Mendez, who uh, they're good pitchers, but they're not as battle tested. Essentially, is probably the best way to put it. But either which way, like I still have some high hopes for this pitching staff.
And now we enter the top five with the Arkansas Razorbacks finished 44 and 16 last year. They were eliminated early in the Fayetteville Regional, losing to Kansas State and Southeast Missouri State. Jared, I was watching that game against Southeast Missouri State because I had a bet on Arkansas to win the entire thing.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this, I was like, is this the worst pick I've ever made? I mean, we're losing to Southeast Missouri State, Jared. But you know what? I'm probably going to pick them again because look at the pitching staff, Jared.
Oh, it's dumb. Like it's you thought like, oh, they lost Hagen Smith, so they're gonna all of a sudden take a step back. No, they got better
Yeah.
somehow. They got Gabe Gackle, Zach Root transferred from ECU. He was like one of the top pitchers for them last year. Gage Wood is absolutely disgusting. And then they got Landon Beidelshees, who's a transfer from Iowa State, who put up really good numbers last year. He's just gonna be throwing midweek games, like those games that don't even matter. He's just gonna go out there and be tossing. It's really, really dumb what they've put together, but you gotta love it if you're an Arkansas Razorbacks fan because that rotation is nasty.
Tyler, who's going to hit? Please. We need some timely hitting here because they've always had pitching. We've seen it. But who's going to get the big hit? Who's going to get the hit in the regionals to even get them to Omaha? I mean, this team keeps falling flat and they're so good, but they just don't hit in the biggest moments. Who's going to get the big hit this year?
I can totally see someone like, putting throwing a dart to a board here. Justin Thomas Jr. transfer from Florida Southwestern State last year could be a guy that kind of steps in this year. But obviously the big person in this lineup is Wahia Aloy. Sacramento State transfer from his freshman year, has a ton of power from the right side of the plate, but you mentioned it, like the hit tool has just not been there the past couple years. He's really aggressive. And as much as you would love to, you know, have him handle every single pitch possible, it's just tough with the kind of swing that he has because it's a bit grooved. And he really loves the inside pitch, but when you get anything off the plate, it's really tough. But I could totally see Aloy having a pretty big year for the Razorbacks. And then Brent Iredale, the natural Aussie on this team, comes in from New Mexico Junior College. He had a fantastic fall for this ball club. So I can see those guys being the big catalyst of this team. And they even throw in like Ryder Helfrich, who's a sophomore catcher. Going even farther down the list, I want to say they got Kendall Diggs back, I do believe. I could be
Yeah, he's
mistaken,
back.
but yeah, Diggs is back. And there was somebody else they got from Vanderbilt that I'm blanking on his name at the moment.
Cam
Um,
Koziel.
Kojul, that's who it is. And, and I want to say they also had Charles Davalon come in from Florida Gulf
Hmm.
Coast. So they have some pretty good transfers on the offensive side. But we mentioned this on a podcast recently. The whole Virginia lineup had a collective OPS higher than any of the Arkansas Razorback bats last year. Um, which is insane to think about, but that's just how it is. But I really do hope that there is a change on the offensive front for Arkansas this year because they have some pretty enticing bats in that lineup.
That stat just made me change my college World Series pick. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, I had Arkansas ready. I was going to talk about their pitching and how good it is, and Jared was even talking about how stupid it is in a
Yeah.
good way. And I always gravitate towards the best pitching staffs in the country, and I think Arkansas has it. But if you're telling me that Virginia's entire lineup cumulatively has a higher OPS than anybody on Arkansas? No, I'm sorry, you're not my pick anymore, right? I'm a fluid guy, you know. If the stats aren't there, the stats aren't there. So before we rate or before we break into the final four of the top 10, let's take our first break. All right, number 4 on the top 10 college baseball teams, LSU finished 43 and 23, went out early though in the Chapel Hill Regional and fought to the very end against number 1 seed UNC before getting bounced. Tyler, NIL powerhouse.
That is putting it very nicely.
Yeah.
I think if it's not for Texas A&M, they have the most NIL just in general in college
Yeah.
baseball. Like it's ridiculous what they have at their disposal. But another thing that's ridiculous, the pitching. The pitching is really, really deep this year. Cade Anderson's gonna be their Friday guy. He had a really, really good fall. He's another draft eligible sophomore that could really fly up boards this year on the draft side. But then after that, you get Anthony Ianson, who came in from UC San Diego last year. Really, really good curveball and slider mix, but the fastball kind of gets hit around a little bit. But then Chase Shores is returning. And if anybody remembers Chase Shores' freshman year, he's up here sitting 99 to 102 with basically a demon sinker across a good bit of innings to start the year before he went down for Tommy John. So it's a really, really good rotation to have. And that's not even including like William Schmidt, who was arguably the best right-handed prep pitcher in last year's class. They've got a few other guys too. I'm trying to remember. Jacob Myers comes in from Nicholls State. Strikes have always been an issue, but the stuff is insanely good. Chandler Dorsey comes in from Florida, or I think it was South Florida. Devin Sheeran comes in from Mount St. Mary's. It's just Connor Ware comes in from JUCO. These guys are just really, really good, and that's the best way to put it. And they're not like Arkansas where you have the offensive questions. Like you look at what they have. Stephen Milan comes back after having a really, really good freshman campaign last year. They get Chris Stanfield away from the draft, away from Auburn, and he's going to be in the outfield for them. Derek Curiel comes in. He's going to be probably the top freshman on that team offensively. And then you also get Daniel Dickinson from Utah Valley, who really just put together an insane year last year for that ball club. So, and that's not even mentioning Jared Jones, the big bopper himself. So, like, just looking at what they have, and even include some like under the radar guys like Blaze Priester, who's a JUCO guy, came in and was tearing the cover off the baseball during the fall. So realistically, this team is better than what they had last year, coming off that World Series win over, the likes of Florida, Wake Forest. Everybody remembers that Rhett Lauder, Paul Skeens duel with the Tommy White walk-off tank. Like I could totally see this team making it back to Omaha, making a deep run. And honestly, I think having them at 4 is underrating them immensely, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens. This is a really, really stacked ball club.
Well, Jared, I mean, this is your guys' list. So
Yeah, I know.
who's the one underrating him? Is it you underrating him?
I was Tyler.
No,
Yeah,
Tyler's saying this team is so underrated, but he's like, I did it by fault. I mean,
so
I,
we kind of talked about this on our preview too. Like to me, there's so much talent here. You're gonna have to figure out like where guys are gonna play. That's like the
seems like a good problem to have.
yeah, like it's a great problem to have. So, but it's like, and like Jay Johnson's one of the best coaches in college baseball. He's gonna figure it out. But like college baseball season is short, so if you have to spend 2 weeks like trying to figure out like who's going to play where and like who's going to play at what position, like that could be detrimental in some sense, but I don't think it's going to hurt them a ton. I think I had them at 2 in my personal ranking, so like I had them a lot higher. the squad's stacked. Like I feel bad that we have them at four, but this team the teams above them are really good too.
So I'm trying to figure out. So if you had them at two, Tyler's saying they're underrated. How did they get to four? What happened?
We have two other voters, Monty and Peyton.
And they
Uh,
were they were
yeah,
they had LSU maybe in the 6 to 7 range. Am I thinking of
Mo
that correctly?
Monty had him at 6. I
yeah,
know
that's
that
what brought him
much.
down.
And admittedly, I think I put them at 4. And then I think Jared, you and Peyton put him at 3. So it's not
Okay,
even my fault. It's Monty's.
yeah, they should
we
be
can
top three.
we can blame we can blame Monty, but number three, Virginia is also really damn good. I mean, they finished 46-17 last year. They made it to the final eight in Omaha, but unfortunately fell short against UNC and Florida State. We've talked about the hitting, we've talked about the pitching. So when you guys ranked these teams, did you both have Virginia below LSU?
I believe I had them above.
You had
This,
Virginia
yeah,
above LSU. So you think LSU is the better team. Tyler, do you think so as well?
I actually had Virginia above LSU. I think Jared, you had it the other way around.
oh, did I? Okay,
I think you may have. I can't remember. I know Monty had him 1 because Monty's biased, but
Monty's
we
from Virginia.
So so my question then here, Tyler, I'll ask you.
okay.
It's biased, right? Because he's a Virginia guy, but is there an element where you can understand where he's coming from? I mean, you guys have him at three. They must be pretty damn good and have at least a shot at being number one.
It's that offensive lineup that they have that really puts it together. It might be the best offense in the entire country again. And we mentioned before having that lineup having a higher OPS collectively than any individual Arkansas hitter. They're going to do it again this year, more than likely. They get Henry Ford, Henry Godbout back, and those were two of the biggest bats last year outside of like Jacob Ferentz, who's an older transfer from like a D2 college, if I remember correctly. But those three bats, Ford, Godbout, and Ferentz are probably going to be 1, 2, 3 in that lineup this year. Not to mention James Nunnally, probably their top freshman coming in. Harrison Didowick returns after being eligible as a sophomore last year. Trying to think, I
They got
might
Aiden
be
Teal, which is Kyle
Aiden
Teal's
Teal.
brother.
Luke Hansen returns. He's sneakily underrated for them. Aiden Harris might be on the bench, but he's really powerful. Chris Arroyo comes in from JUCO. Eric Becker is a sophomore. If you know Nicky Becker, who's on the prep side, that's his older brother. So looking at what they have a ton of firepower, and there's going to be a lot of home runs and doubles in this lineup. Like this is arguably, I don't even want to say arguably, this is the best lineup in the ACC. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Pitching side, there are some question marks, and I know Evan Blanco will not be pitching this weekend. It sounds like he's just a little bit behind schedule, had a little bit of hiccup last week, so he won't be pitching, but they still have Jay Woolfolk returning. He's going to be their starter on Friday this week. Bryson Moore, who was a guy that didn't pitch much last year, he's a bit of an analytical darling in the 2026 class, so I'm excited to see what he can do. And admittedly, like you look at the rest of the pitching staff, it's not as deep as some of the other teams like Arkansas, LSU. You even talked about like Tennessee and Texas A&M leading up here to kind of spoil the next two. But like, admittedly, when your lineup is just that good, you can score 20 runs a game and still you win handily. So like, this is a very very fun team to really look at on paper. And hey, for all we know, this pitcher staff could surprise us.
So Jared, that would be my next question. Like
Hmm.
there will be some days where this team only scores 6 runs or 5 runs. Like we know that. It's college baseball. Like we do these college baseball previews before the season. We talk about the best offenses and everybody gets, enthralled by the home runs and the stolen bases and how good these guys are offensively. And then we're in the dog days and it's like, well, they just lost 13-11.
Yeah.
Like, do they have the pitching to truly win it all in the end?
Yeah, I think that was the argument against them last year, right? They didn't have the pitching. They basically would score 10 runs a game. I went out and saw Virginia quite a bit last year, and they'd score like 7 to 10 runs and still lose. And
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing you talked about. You just run out of bullpen arms. Like you just don't have guys to throw anymore. As Tyler mentioned, they got the Friday night guy in Evan Blanco, right? He's taken huge upticks in his velocity. He's really kind of solidified himself as the dude on Friday nights. Yeah, he's not going to be there this weekend, but it sounds like he's fine. Everything's going to be good. He'll be back the weekend after. They brought back Jay Woolfolk, who is a senior now. This guy's an animal on the mound. Like the numbers weren't great last year. A lot of confidence issues with him. I think he ran into some of those last year. Guy was a quarterback at Virginia as well at one point, and he's just really started to focus on baseball. And this is like his second or third year just doing baseball only. And so he dominated in the super regionals and the regionals last year. And really kind of turned things on to another level. So having him back is going to be huge. As Tyler mentioned, Chris Arroyo's coming over from JUCO as a two-way guy. Hits absolute tanks, is going to be the first baseman, and he's going to be throwing on Sundays. So like that guy's good. You got Bryson Moore as well, and then they added some bullpen arms. They got some dudes from the transfer portal that I think are going to be a little bit better. They added a couple of freshmen who are very, very intriguing as well. And I think they're just going to have more depth than they had last year. They get the flack for the years past. They've always been known as an offensive team over pitching. But this is the first year, I think, at least for me, that I've seen them in the fall and I've seen the arms, and I'm like, okay, they have more than they used to have.
Love to hear it. All right, let's get into the number 2 team on the top 25 college baseball teams, University of Tennessee. Reigning champs, finished 60-13 last year and won the College World Series, became the first one seed to win it since 1999. So, Tyler, what I'm going to ask from you, talk to the Tennessee fans listening, because I can already hear them. They're pissed. They just went 60-13. They won the College World Series. They have arguably the best coach in college baseball. They have a stacked team again. Why are they not number 1? And then Jared, build them back up. Why they maybe should be number 1. But Tyler, tear them down. Give it to them. Give it to the Tennessee folk.
Yeah, so easiest way to put this, even for me who had them at 1, actually. So but the biggest thing is they lose all of that offensive firepower last year that led them to that national championship. We've said it before, time and time again. The top 5 in that lineup last year: Simo, Blake Burke, Kavaris Tears, Dylan Dreiling, and there's another guy in that lineup I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now. Jared, run my one more. Please help me here if I forget them.
AJ, no, the Blake Burke. You
I
got
said
him.
Blake. I
Billy
got
Amick.
Burke. Amick, that's who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lose those 5 guys. Not to mention AJ Causey, who is that big piece in terms of like being a opener style second out of the bullpen on Friday guy. Like he was the starter at the beginning of the year. Then they started using Chris Stamos on Fridays to open up for him. And he really did save that bullpen on Friday nights, keeping them in the game, helping them stay healthy for the rest of the weekend to kind of let like Drew Beam come in on Saturdays and do that. And not to mention Drew Beam's gone. So there's a lot of firepower missing. But I'll let Jared explain why I put them at number 1.
Jared,
Yeah,
floor is yours.
I'll say so. When the transfer portal hit, like Tennessee was quiet, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, they're just gonna not do anything at all." Then all of a sudden, they land like Andrew Fisher's basically one of the best bats in the transfer portal. Dude hit 20 jacks last year, hit 57 RBIs. They got Gavin Killian from Louisville, who like table setter, like at the top of the lineup, absolutely rakes. Like they have Dean Curley, who's one of the best players in the entire nation at shortstop. Like this lineup somehow is still stacked after losing all those guys. They will go and get Liam Doyle in the transfer portal, who's going to be, I believe, their Friday night guy this year. They're going to try. They got Nate Snead as well, who went 10-2 with a 3.11 ERA, 75 innings pitched. They bring in Tegan Coons and as a freshman, who's one of the top prep guys or one of the top prepper pitchers in the MLB draft class last year. I mean, it's just going to be a lot of fun. And they're trying Marcus Phillips out as a starter, who's I think was projected to be the closer for the team. He's going to wind up getting some innings as well. So like, regardless of losing a ton of firepower in the draft last year, like they went and hit the portal like right before the portal closed, basically, and just added a bunch of dudes.
A reloaded Tennessee team sounds
Yeah.
pretty dangerous. Trying to go back to back. First time since South Carolina, if I remember correctly. Do I got that
Yeah.
correct?
Yep, that's right.
Look at
Yep.
me go. proudest moment on the podcast for myself. All right, number one, Texas A&M, the best team in college baseball. They finished as the runner-up, though, to Tennessee in the College World Series. I'm sure Texas A&M fans are thrilled to hear that they are the number one team in our preseason rankings. Jared, I'll throw it over to you. Why is Texas A&M the best team in the country?
I mean, this team is just one of the most well-balanced, well-rounded teams I think in the entire country. Um, I know we talked about earlier, like having a chip on your shoulder. Like you lose to Tennessee and then the national championship, then your coach bounces for Texas, leaves you hanging. You're not just your head coach, like, but your assistants leave as well. So like they all go to Texas, your rival, the biggest rival for you. And then now you're like, okay, we don't have a coach. All our players entered the portal. Like as soon as the head coach announced he was leaving, then they get all those guys confirmed back because they had to hire Mike Early, who's at that's who the players wanted to come back and coach Texas A&M. So they got Jace Laviolette back, who's basically the number one player in the country right now. They got Graham Grahovic, who was SEC freshman, or sorry, but they got that SEC freshman of the year. I mean, the lineup is just absolutely juiced, and it's so well balanced, and it's just going to be a really, really fun team to watch next year. Pitching staff too. Like Ryan Prager goes in the third round of the Angels. He's like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to go back to Texas A&M and be your Friday night guy again. They lost Shane Sado to an injury, but then they got Miles Patton and a couple other guys. I mean, it's just like I don't see a hole in this lineup. Like we talked about, like Virginia pitching staff might struggle, Arkansas lineup might struggle, but like top to bottom, Texas A&M is just absolutely loaded.
So Tyler, you had Tennessee number one, probably over number two, Texas A&M.
Hmm.
What's kind of the difference here, and what brought you to this rank?
Maybe the biggest thing for me, kind of looking at what Vitello did in the portal, like what Jared mentioned, like yes, they started slow, but then you get within like 2 days, Gavin Keelan, Andrew Fisher, and Liam Doyle. That is a big win for them. And for me, it was tough to just take the reigning champion off the pedestal that they were deservedly on. That's not to say A&M's not good in that sense. I think with them, Gavin Grahovic, Jace Laviolette, Caden Sorrell, that is arguably the best trio of bats in the country. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Um, Looking at what they have, Gavin Cash might be an interesting transfer to kind of put in. But it's just a bit of a question mark with some of the offensive pieces for me outside of those core guys. Um, that Tennessee kind of just has. Like Tennessee added Alberto Ozuna very late in the process to kind of fill in that whole first base. Andrew Fisher, as much as there's been talk about him being injured to kind of start the year, he's still going to be good to go. And with them, like Reese Chapman comes in, does a very good job. Tennessee gets a really good freshman crop coming in with Jay Abernathy. That Jay Abernathy might be their starting left fielder, Friday. So for me, looking at what they were able to bring in, Tennessee, for me, with the national championship just sitting there on the shelf for them, that was the biggest thing for me, was looking at that going, it's tough for me to look at this and go, hey, national championship, it's right there. It's really tough to kind of just look at that and go, they're still really good. And it's the championship bias, maybe, potentially, but they were so close together for me that it was such a tough decision. It's just it's splitting hairs at this point is probably the best way to put it on my end.
These teams sound so good. Like when you guys are ranking these guys, like how's the health of college baseball right now?
It's fun. That's the best way to put it. Is insanely fun, and having the kind of upward trajectory we're having right now with college baseball is a blessing. Like looking at what we could have in the future if, say, the league and Rob Manfred decide to move the draft to Omaha in the near future, to kind of get it away from the All-Star weekend. That in itself would be a huge win for college baseball because now not only are the eyes are on Omaha, but now you're on the eyes of the biggest stars in the game that are draft eligible. So hopefully at some point we'll see that happen. I really do want to see it in the next CBA, honestly, to kind of see if like, hey, can we move the draft up to like late June to make it easier for everybody? But outside of that, like it's a skyrocketing affair with college baseball. I think people really do love the environment, the atmosphere, and just watching it on TV. Like I'm trying to think of a regional game a few years ago, Arkansas and Oklahoma State. That barrage fest in Stillwater is still one of the best games in recent memory for me to ever watch. And like even to go local, like East Carolina, as much as those fans have been kind of let down to end the year, they're the most dedicated fan base in the country, hands down, and they create the best environment, at least on the East Coast. So there's a lot to like about what college baseball brings to the basic consumer, and just looking at what's coming forward with the talent that we have in next year's draft class. I wouldn't be shocked if college baseball continues to just climb up the ladder of college sports and starts to really create its own name for itself outside of like football and basketball that obviously rule the roost throughout college sports.
Firing me up right now. Let's get into another subject that's going to continue to fire me up and hopefully fire up our listeners. The first team preseason All Americans. I'm going to go through your guys' list. Then I'm going to ask one of you guys to pick kind of your favorite guy, but not the Jace Laviolette. Like, I want to save the best of the best for our Golden Spikes finalists, and then we'll pick a winner there. But pick kind of the guy that you want people to key in on. So at catcher, Ike Irish, Auburn. He's a junior. He's the number one catcher in the country. At first base, Henry Ford. Not that Henry Ford who invented the car, I'm pretty sure. Ford, whatever. That was a bad joke. All right. He plays at Virginia. He's a sophomore. Second baseman, Henry Godbout from Virginia. He's a junior. Third baseman, Gavin Grahovic, Texas A&M sophomore. Shortstop, Iva Arquette from Oregon State. He's a junior. And the outfield, Jace Laviolette from Texas A&M. He's a junior. Cam Canarella from Clemson, another junior. And Drew Burris rounds out the outfield, a sophomore from Georgia Tech. DH, Ethan Petrie from South Carolina. He's a junior, has some of the best power. Like, this dude just destroys baseballs. And then the best two-way player in the country, Kyle Johnson from Duke. He's a sophomore. The best pitcher in the country, left-handed pitcher Jamie Arnold, the junior from Florida State. Rounding out this rotation, Tyler Bremer, a righty from UCSB. He's also a junior. We got left-handed pitcher Ryan Prager, a redshirt junior from Texas A&M. Gabe Gackle, a righty from Arkansas. He's a sophomore. And right-handed pitcher Matt Scott from Stanford, a junior. And then in the bullpen, lefty Ben Abbott. Did I pronounce that correctly from TCU? The junior, the lefty? Disgusting. I pronounced that correct, right? Right, guys?
Yeah, Abelt, right? Or yeah.
Abbott?
It could be either variation, honestly. I haven't been given an official answer on that.
And then to round it out, Derek Smith, the junior from NC State. So, Jared, I'll throw it over to you. Who's the one guy people need to key in on that might not be the three finalists for the Golden Spikes?
Yeah, since I've seen him a lot, I'm going to go with this guy, Henry Godbout out of Virginia, the second base. This guy just has elite contact rates, 86%, and he just feasts on fastballs. I saw him against Chase Burns. Chase Burns tried to throw him like 99 up in the zone, and he just torched it over the left field fence. Um, Still has some problems tapping into power, but he's really, really just got elite contact rates. He had a 472 OBP. He walked more than he struck out. So he walked 29 times and only struck out 20 times and 172 at bats. Like the dude just hits all day, every day. And I think he's just a guy that I think gets overlooked because he doesn't tap into the power as much. But man, like, if he can get to double digit home runs this year, like that dude's going to be high up in the draft board.
Tyler, what about you?
I'm gonna go with that Arkansas arm, Gabe Gackle. And for me, when you're talking about stuff like pure arsenal stuff that uh, all pitchers have, he might have the best stuff in the entire country as a sophomore, mind you. Just looking at what he is like, yes, he's undersized at 5'11", 190, but he gets up to 99 with an extremely flat fastball, has a slider up to 90 and a curveball in the mid 80s that there's people who just cannot touch. I think if I remember correctly, he had a whiff rate of like 40% on the curveball this past year. And just thinking about how that is over a full season, like he's throwing strikes at a good clip. The metrics are really enticing, even for a guy of his stature, and he's got feel for a good changeup. So, like for me, looking at what he can be, and that's kind of the way that I looked at this with my All Americans, is looking at what can they be at the end of the year. And there's so much talk, there's so much hype about what Gackle can be. And for me, I envision him hitting that completely. Like it's a low release with the kind of size that he is, but the stuff is so good that you really have to admire the fact that he might end up being the best pitcher in the SEC this year.
Wow. It could be that good. It's just the stuff is that disgusting. Like, is it a? I haven't seen a pitch. Is it like a heavy fastball, tons of breaking balls, or what? What should we be looking at?
You're going to be looking at a fastball that gets like when we're talking about like vertical carry, like 19 inches on average is really, really good. Not to mention it's very flat with a low release, so it's going to miss a ton of bats if he's in the zone a lot. But I also look at the slider and the curveball in high school as a South, I think as a South Cali arm. He was up to like 3,000 RPMs on his breaking ball, and that was back when it was like upper 70s, like it hovered around 80 miles an hour. Now he's throwing curveballs in the mid 80s with like 28 RPM or 2,800 RPMs. And now he's got a slider that gets up to 90 with just demonic two plane break. Like it's really impressive what Arkansas has done to transform his arsenal for like I mentioned, a guy at 5'11", 190 who really doesn't have much going for him in terms of projection, but now his velocity's jumped up, his braking stuff has gotten better, and now he's going to be given the task of being the Friday guy at Arkansas in a staff that has the likes of Zach Root, Gage Wood, Lando Beetleshees, all these guys that can contend for Friday spots at other teams in the country. So I'm really excited to see what he can do this year.
Well, you excited me for sure. But now it's time. The three finalists for the Golden Spikes. Jared, the three best players in college baseball. Who do you got?
Uh, to me, it's Jace Lavalette, Jamie Arnold, Tyler Bremner. We talked about it on our podcast recently about how like, an arm could go number one overall, right? I think Jamie Arnold's taken some insane steps with developing a third pitch this year. Like he could be the best player in the entire country. Tyler had mentioned that on our last podcast. So like I think those three guys are really, really the ones that stand out to me.
Tyler, what about you?
I'm going to go a little off the wall here, honestly. Like, as much as Laviolette, Arnold, and Bremner is probably the most realistic one, I'm going to throw a little wrench in here. Drew Burress
Mm.
as one, Jamie Arnold, but then also maybe give me Luke Stevenson
Hmm.
out of UNC. I could see that being the final three to kind of like mix things up. Like, Burress is the best 2026 draft eligible player next year. And then you throw in Jamie Arnold, probably the best arm in the country, but then Luke Stevenson, for what he did as a freshman in the ACC, he probably put up arguably one of the best catching seasons at UNC outside of like BJ Surhoff back in like the 70s when he was there. Um, and just everything for me is pointing towards a giant breakout sophomore campaign for Stevenson. If he stays healthy, I think he's arguably one of the best players in the country.
So you guys are in agreement though, because Jamie Arnold is the only one who was in both. Is he the best player overall in in the country?
I genuinely
I,
would not be shocked.
Yeah, I think so.
Really.
I mean, especially if he's taken that development step that like Tyler, I don't know if you saw it in the fall. Someone did, I think, on our team, but Monty might have. But if he's taken that step, like he's gonna be absolutely disgusting because he was already so good with just two pitches.
So Jamie Arnold is your Golden Spikes Award winner, right,
Could be. I
Tyler?
Could be.
wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him.
But we need an official pick here for the people. We
Uh,
got to have an official pick. Who is the Golden Spikes winner at the end of the year? Jared, then Tyler, and then we'll get into our College World Series picks.
I'm going Jace Laviolette. I mean, he's
Okay.
cranked 50 home runs in his first 2 years of his entire collegiate career. Like, and he's already hit exit velos over 115 miles an hour. Like that dude, I just think is gonna have another good year, another really good year. Maybe he hits another 30 bombs. Like, just sign me up for Jays.
Tyler?
Give me Arnold. Honestly, like I, I'll I will go out and say that Jamie Arnold, not only could he be the 1-1 pick, but it's really hard to look at what he's been able to do this fall. Work on the changeup and still have the insane metrics and traits that he has and just not dice up the ACC at an unbelievable rate this year. So I'm going to go with Arnold on this one.
And Tyler, you do a ton of draft research, and just another reminder to go check out his top 80. You can find it on justbaseball.com. They also went over it on the clock. Is Jamie Arnold a better draft prospect than Hagen Smith?
Oh, they're similar. They really are. Um, I would say at this stage, with the command that Arnold has had shown, like he's shown during the sophomore campaign, Hagen Smith never had that as a sophomore, but I would argue Hagen Smith threw a lot harder as a junior than what Arnold's throwing. Like Hagen Smith was touching 100 early in starts and sitting like 95, 98 through 5, 6, 7 innings. And Arnold's really maxed out like 97. So there's more upside there with similar metrics. And I would wager that Hagen's deception really puts that slider to use for him. And in the changeups, like iffy with both. Like Jamie's not thrown the changeup enough to this point for me to say that it's more than like an average pitch.
Mm.
However, this offseason, he's really worked on improving that pitch, and now he's getting negative vertical on a changeup that it really just falls off the table with same arm speed from a low release. So for me, I think Hagen Smith is just slightly ahead of Arnold for me, with the fact that he's got more velocity and has already shown the upside that he has. Like I think going back to last year, Jared, I don't know if you were there for the 17 strikeout game or had watched it, but that may have been the most dominant outing I've ever seen in my life in
I
person.
watched it. That was unbelievable. I wasn't watching it in person. I was in Florida watching with Arm, and both of us just had our jaws on the floor. I was like, is he better than Carlos Rodon right now? Like, it seemed like that type of profile, and I'm watching a guy dominate with fastball slider. Just nobody had a shot, and he was facing a really good team, right? He wasn't facing some bullshit JUCO team or some team that they just randomly scheduled in order to make Hagen Smith look good. No, this is one of the best teams in the country that he dominated. We were looking to ourselves like, and I'm like, you got to move him up your draft rankings. Like, are we looking at the same pitcher right now?
The best part was Travis Bazzana 0 for 3, 3 strikeouts when
Bye.
Hagen was in the game. And then he did not have a ball under 100 on the exit velocities the rest of the weekend. If that tells you how dominant of an outing Hagen had that night. And like I trying to think, I think it's Trent Carraway's brother. We were talking like halfway through the fourth inning. And we're sitting here looking at each other like, hey, Hagen's got 9 strikeouts through 3 innings. What's going on here? Like it's really efficient. We're looking at this. It's like, is this going to be really special? Go through the fourth innings, 12 strikeouts. Through the fifth inning, 15 strikeouts. We're sitting here. It's like, when is this ending? Like, like that's serious. He's on like 60 pitches through 5 innings. I think his final pitch count was 78 pitches through six, and they yanked him after that because of they're trying to keep him on a pitch count. Well, we're sitting here. He threw like 60 pitches for strikes out of 78. Walked one guy on like it was a 4 pitch walk to open the fourth. Gave up like three kind of weaker hits, and not to mention the one play that wasn't a strikeout was a spectacular diving play. Like it was the best of both worlds as like a guy that really enjoys pitching duels too. Because like Aiden May was matching him 0 for 0 almost throughout most of that outing until he got hurt. So like if I had died the day after that, I would have died a happy man, knowing I got to watch that outing.
I love that. All right, let's stick on the best of the best. Our picks to win the College World Series. I'll go first. It was going to be Arkansas, but this team just cannot hit enough. So I'm going with Texas A&M. If you're telling me they got the best third baseman in the country, they have the best, arguably, player in the country in Chase Laviolette, and they have one of the best pitchers in the country in Ryan Prager, and you factor in a chip on their shoulder, losing to Tennessee in last year's College Baseball World Series, and an extra chip losing their coach to Texas, Texas A&M rights their wrongs, wins the College World Series. Jared, I'll throw it over to you. Who's your pick to win it?
I love that pick. I'm gonna go. This is the team I think you should bet on is LSU, LSU Tigers. I'm picking them to win it all. I love Jay Johnson, the culture that he builds every single year in that clubhouse. Like no matter who's in the door, like those are his guys every single year, and he's got big leadership in Jared Jones coming back. He's got a rotation that he did not have last year. Like if that team had Chase Shores last year, they probably are a lot better than they were. And so like for me, they bring in a ton of transfers like Chris Stanfield, Daniel Dickinson. Like these guys are some top dudes in the college baseball. Give me LSU.
Tyler? He's thinking.
Do I want to go off the wall here? Do I really want to go off the wall? Um, you know what? Give me the first ACC champion since they did it in 2015, Virginia.
Wow.
Wow.
Just how good of a lineup that is offensively. Like, yes, I understand the recent trips to Omaha have ended 0 for barbecue. Like they went 0 and 2 out pretty quickly. But I feel different about this lineup this year. I feel like this is the year that they kind of they turned the ship a little bit. They turned that narrative around in Omaha. And like yes, we talked earlier about the pitching. Uh, Again, they could surprise. They really could. So, give me Virginia, and I'm going to triple down on my ACC is better than SEC take.
Yeah, so that I've heard that take. Explain that a little longer as we wrap this up here. You think that the ACC right now is better than the SEC in college baseball?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for me, looking at the talent pool that the ACC has coming up, this year and next year, like adding Stanford is very big for the ACC because that's another we talked about earlier, it can be boom or bust, but this is a team that had 2 or 3 straight Omaha appearances not that long ago, within the past 5 years. Still have the same head coach. They're returning 99% of their innings from last year, have a lot of returnees, have arguably the best freshman in the country in Charlie Bates. Rentaro Sasaki is also on campus. Um, Having them, and then you look at the depth overall, like Pitt baseball itself has not made the NCAA tournament in 30 years. 1995 was the last time they made a tournament in baseball. This could be the year that they kind of flip that switch and go to the playoffs this year. I think they're fully capable. I could totally envision a double digit ACC like squadron going into the postseason play this year. And even looking beyond that, you look at what the ACC had in freshmen last year: AJ Gracia, Drew Burris, Luke Stevenson, all these guys that you look on paper, see what they were able to do. And this is even like looking at it from a draft standpoint. I think the freshman class in the ACC last year has set them up for success moving forward, even in the age of NIL. And if they manage to keep Drew Burris, AJ Gracia, and these other guys, like NC State's bullpen has Jacob Duden, Cooper Consiglio, Derek Smith. That's the best bullpen on the East Coast. If they can manage to keep all those guys next year, and I think there's a non-zero chance that that happens. The ACC, I feel like, is better suited to really compete with the SEC. But the first thing that has to happen first, and at the time this was a bold take. Now I have to kind of sit with it. Is the ACC needs to show up in Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
Last year it was just ACC, SEC. I think it was 4 squads each, and it was still an all SEC final. Can the ACC break through this year? I could totally see it happening. I really do. And if that happens, I think the narrative does need to be talked about.
Jared, are you starting to come around to this take, or are you still a little bit hesitant? Because he said it himself. There were 4 teams from the ACC, 4 teams from the SEC in Omaha. All 4 SEC teams made it.
Yeah, I'm still hesitant. I do agree the ACC is getting so much better, right? He talked about the Stanford edition, and Uh, like you have Virginia, Duke, Wake Forest, like all these teams are really, really good. But man, the SEC is getting stronger too. Like they're bringing in a bunch of teams as well, like Oklahoma and Texas. So I, the SEC is very, very strong, and it's hard to argue against it. I mean, like you look at our top 25, like 15 of those teams are SEC schools. Like every SEC school is basically in the top 25.
Well, what we do know for sure is this college baseball season is going to be awesome. Jared, Tyler, thank you so much for joining us here. Feel free to plug anything, right? I already talked about on the clock, but anything else, let us know kind of what you guys are going to be up to. Tyler, we'll start with you and then Jared.
Yeah, so give me a follow at Tyler Jennings 24, and then obviously on the clock _1, I believe, is the podcast username. But the biggest thing that we have coming up, obviously being in person for games this year, we get, what is it, Texas, Arizona, Ole Miss, Louisville, Clemson, and Oklahoma State this weekend. That is as loaded as a lineup for a tournament that you'll see at the start of the year. Not to mention, we'll get some Dallas Baptist views as well. They're an underrated mid major, in my opinion, and we've ranked them on the top 25 for a reason. But outside of that, like getting more video, we'll have conjoined draft list of 200 players coming out sometime before conference play starts, so maybe like mid March. And then we'll have individual team breakdowns, or not team breakdowns, but player breakdowns. Like uh, the first one that I'm going to be working on and have completed is Ethan Petrie, kind of breaking down, what changed from freshman year to sophomore year, because the contact really didn't improve at all from what he had as a very solid freshman campaign. It really regressed, even with arguably double plus raw power from the right side of the plate. So I want to break down for the masses like my honest evaluation of him and other players moving forward, to kind of just like not take away from the consensus, but maybe give other people an idea of like how differently we evaluate compared to some of the bigger outlets out there.
Phenomenal.
Make our process known to people so that way we can gain either, trust amongst people with our writing, and also include video, include data to kind of give us more evidence to show like, hey, here's what happened, but here's what we can improve upon. This isn't just me trying to sit here and talk smack about a player, obviously, but like what's the best way to improve that draft stock moving forward. So there's gonna be a lot of that moving forward, and I'm really excited to get more in depth on some of these players the more that I've seen them over the years.
And I'm excited to read. Jared, what else are you going to be working on, and where can we find your work outside of justbaseball.com?
Yeah, so the big things that we have coming up, and then they've started to come out this week, is conference previews. So for each college conference, ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, SEC, we're gonna have a conference preview that includes the teams that got ranked in the top 25, the preseason award winners, so the all conference teams. We have projected conference champions, teams to watch. All that's included in the one encompassing article. Then on Friday, on opening day, we're going to have a what you need to know for college baseball article
That's
go out.
today, as this episode is coming out, because
Yes.
we are
Yep.
recording Wednesday late into the night. So, yeah, Jared, go ahead.
Yeah. So that article is out now. Has the top 25 preseason All Americans, all the draft prospects you need to watch, the key storylines you should be watching this season as well. So our goal is to bring you some of the most comprehensive coverage of college baseball, and we're going to be doing it all season long. And you can find me
Awesome.
at Jared CP1 on X.
Perfect. So you can find both of their Twitter handles in the episode description, and of course the link to that big time article on justbaseball.com. You can find all the links in there. Jared, Tyler, really appreciate you guys coming on. This is always one of my favorite episodes of the year, just talking about the great sport that is college baseball. So sit back on Friday, today, Valentine's Day. If you're not hanging out with your significant other, shout out to those people out there. Turn on the TV, watch some college baseball, and make sure to keep following along these guys' content on the Clock Podcast and, of course, on justbaseball.com. For Jared, Tyler, I'm Peter. With that, thank you, everybody.